Hi, everybody, on this nice and bright summer day today. I want to welcome all of you to the Talking Headless show on the Players Production Network. This show, my name is Shashi Bellamkonda. I am the Principal Research Director at Infotech Research Group. But this show is independent of what I do as my day job. And I've been hosting this show for over a year, taken over from Paul Greenberg, who some of you will know, and Brent Leary, both of whom who produce this show. The intent of the show is basically the mission is to elevate the AR analyst relations and analyst technology analyst community. And as things shift and as we get into that and more people join this community, I hope you will all continue to look for this show. Today, I'm really excited. I know sometimes I was just saying I may be coming across as very serious, but we have two fun guests. Ashley Chabot is the Director and Head of Analyst Relations at Miro. She leads the strategy for engaging in industry analysts, in this fast evolving thing. She's very fun to talk to, and I'm sure you'll all enjoy it, being in the community for over 10 years. My second guest, whom I've met many times, is Jon Reed. You have to follow him. Again, a very enjoyable and interesting person to talk to. He's a veteran enterprise analyst and also the co-founder of Diginomica. So widely recognized as an enterprise software analyst and an innovator in the media, and known across a lot of tech ecosystems. Unfiltered commentary, and I'm sure that will come across as we do this. So the first segment is with Ashley, and I'm going to be bringing her on. And after that, we'll have Jon Reed, and after that, a closing panel with both of them. If you have any questions, please put them in whichever channel you're joining from. We are streaming on LinkedIn Live. We are streaming on X, on YouTube, and probably you'll find this podcast as a podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. With that, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ashley to the stage.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Hi, Ashley. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. I appreciate you having me.
No, it was great to join, and I enjoy all the guests who come on this show. I think, like I said, I've been doing this from May of last year. Very enjoyable. I look forward to this very much, as I'm looking forward to our conversation with you. So I may not have done a good job introducing you. So go ahead and introduce yourself, who you are, and let the community know.
Awesome. Well, I'm Ashley Chabot. I lead analyst relations at Miro currently. I have been doing AR in some way, shape, or form for the past 10 years or so. And I've actually had the chance to work on several different types of AR teams. So bigger, larger enterprises with multiple business units, to being the solo AR lead at more fast-paced mid-sized enterprise. So I am excited to chat all things AR. And, I think that my perspective on the AR function has definitely evolved over time. So it's cool to look back. I would say if I look back at this conversation we're about to have today in 2 years, I'm sure I'll have a wildly different perspective. It seems to be the case every couple of years. There's a new point of view, a new way of doing things. So it's one of the things I really like the most about this particular function.
Very cool. Now, welcome to the show. Now, were you an accidental drop into analyst relations, or what was your journey to get into the job you're doing now?
It's completely kind of random, but I got an offer right out of college, actually, to join EMC. And at the time, I was joining a marketing rotational program. They were really popular about 10 years ago, where you had the chance to move around to different roles and explore different functions, which I was really interested in. And right when I was about to join, Dell announced that they were acquiring EMC. And at the time, it was one of the biggest mergers in tech. So
I remember that.
yeah, it was really big. And the company had called me up and said that they still wanted me to join, but they didn't know where they were going to place me. And I would find out a week before I started. So I got a phone call saying that I was going to be on the analyst relations team. So of course, I had no idea what that was or what I was going to be doing. But I mean, I feel like it was the best thing that could have happened to me. I was able to join a team of really experienced and tenured AR managers. I got exposure not only to a large company and how things operated, but how really good AR teams work together, and the foundational elements of AR that I've carried with me throughout my career really came from that time. So really cool, random way about ending up in AR. And over the years, I've definitely dabbled a little bit in other roles, in some adjacent communications functions, but always kept coming back to AR. I really love the strategic nature of it. And I think that you have such a great vantage point in analyst relations, not only of the way that your company is thinking about business strategy and the vision, but also that external perspective, and being able to bring those two things together. I just think it's a great place to be.
Ever think about writing a book about this experience?
I don't know. That has not crossed my mind, but maybe one day, who knows?
That's true. I mean, having worked in like large companies like Dell, and also with the experience in building custom AR programs, I don't know. I'd like your opinion on. There's no template that you can follow other than a few basic things. So, what is the difference? What are some steps in designing an AR program that is custom fit for a business?
I think it really goes down to like, what are your business needs at the time? And that's something you need to always have a pulse on, because they change, especially when you're at a fast-paced company. Priorities shift quickly, and it's really important that the AR program supports those priorities. I think that when you're thinking of having a custom fit AR program, it takes into account a lot of different factors. So not only those business needs and priorities, which should be the number one thing that you're aligning to, but also getting to know your executives and your stakeholders. What are they interested in? What are the things that are keeping them up at night? Where are they spending the majority of their time and energy? And figuring out how you can add value. Maybe there isn't a specific analyst that aligns their coverage to what your executives are focused on, but you can start to glean more insights from analysts that are around those key topics and be able to share them with your leadership team, or maybe stakeholders in the business that would be, maybe you don't think of them right away, but as you start to build relationships internally, you find these people in pockets of organizations who are really eager for insights and eager to understand the trends that are happening in the business. And making sure that those folks are part of your stakeholder list is really important too. I think the same skills that apply to building relationships with external industry analysts, you should use those internally and make sure you're getting to know the right folks in the business, across go-to-market and sales, across marketing, across, depending on how your organization is built, there might be some folks that are kind of tucked into organizations that you wouldn't typically engage with. So that's where I think the custom piece really comes into play too, is not only getting to know the business really well and the business needs, but the people within the business and who are the ones that really stand out to you as great stakeholders and partners. Because I think that the more you're connected and networking internally, you have a better understanding of how you can add value to your business and your different stakeholders.
Very cool. That leads me to the next question. And I haven't met any of these personas, especially the one that I'm going to tell you is, I think about subject matter expert within companies as one, the very grumpy, don't waste my time, why should I engage, versus like, hey, I really want to know if I'm on the right track. I may not accept everything, but I think I need to invest my time. So how do you get this executive buy-in and establish credibility within an organization. Of course, like I told you, I don't know any grumpy executives.
Totally hypothetical. We've not met anyone like this, but if there were stakeholders that weren't as interested in engaging with analysts, I think that building credibility in the upfront is really important with them, in the sense that you, like we were talking about, like understanding, of course, like what keeps them up at night, and being able to potentially share custom, like tailored insights with them for things that they care about is important. But I also think that quick wins are really helpful. So especially if you're starting up a new program and or you're new to the company, identifying the ways in which you can find really quick ways to, and maybe more traditional analyst relations that everyone thinks about, right? But like mentions and reports, being able to have those really fast, quick things to point to, but then being able to set the stage, I think, for more long-term impact. So one thing I'm always thinking about for a stakeholder that maybe is less interested in the engagement externally, thinking about how can I tell a really good story around the outcome that we're building. So trying to track all the work that we're doing along the way. And when we do get that result and outcome, being able to point back to all of those things and make it really clear, that briefing that we did, that analyst summit that we hosted, the engagement that we've been doing for the past 2 years, that they all were building blocks to this particular outcome. And I think that does help with getting future buy-in from those leaders. And when you say, okay, all of these things add up to having a particular outcome that we are excited about as a business.
Very cool. No, this is extremely useful, I'm sure. Now, if we were talking to a company that large or small, some of them don't have an analyst relations function, right? Like if you were talking to a CEO who says like, hey, I feel like I'm missing out. Where should I start? What would be your advice to somebody who doesn't have an analyst relations function?
Yeah, I mean, I think that understanding, almost like doing a quick audit of where perception lies, is probably the best thing. I think that in that instance, an executive or a CEO probably would care about where are we showing up as a business in written research, and then also what is the current perception across different industry analysts, and is it all bucketed together? Does it vary significantly? Do we have some level of consistency? And how much does that align to our actual message? So I think that's always a really important signal to bring back early on when you're either joining a new company or starting a program from scratch, is what do we want the market to be saying about us? And are analysts saying that too? Or are they have some variation of what our message is? Is there any disconnect? And how can we ensure moving forward and build a program around that continuity as we start to engage with these analysts? I also think that if you're in the really early stages of developing an AR program, it's super important to think about what are the goals we want to attach to right away. Do we care about perception change, right? If we're using that same perception change example, is the goal to help amplify our message to as many people as possible and to use analysts as third-party validation and amplification of our message? Or are we really looking for insights? Are we having challenges as a business getting moving from mid-market to enterprise? And how can we get signals from analysts that are helping with, okay, what kind of conversations are they having with their clients? And how can we make sure that that's getting back to the business and letting them know that that's an important signal for the conversations that are happening behind closed doors? I think that, again, it goes back to the understanding the business needs and priorities, but that's probably the number one thing to ask, like as you go out and do more of an audit and understand the current perception across the analyst landscape. It's tying back to, okay, where are we trying to move the needle as a company, and making sure that the like trends and insights that you're sharing back to your business align to those major pillars. And I think that just really helps with ROI in the long run and is how you build credibility as an AR leader.
Cool. No, very, very important point. One thing I wanted to point out is what I call hidden conversations. And you brought that up because analysts are talking to vendors, but more importantly, they are talking to buyers because buyers want a neutral opinion on if they are making the right decision or not. So that's a very valid point. Thank you for bringing that up. AI comes up in so many conversations. What is your advice to other AI professionals on using AI within their, workflow? Is there some fixed way of doing things, or is everybody still experimenting?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's going to have their varying opinions on this one. But for me, I'm really thinking about how with AI, we're able to do like more thinking and less doing. So how are we able to really up level our programs to that strategic level that sometimes when I talk to other AR peers, that can be a challenge because you do get so bogged down in some of the execution work. Especially when you're a team of one, you're having to wear multiple hats, and it is hard to transition from being the person who is executing at the ground level, but then also showing up and having a seat at the table from a strategic perspective. But as as AI is doing more of the work, we have more opportunities as AR leaders to think strategically and be looking across the business, be partnering across the business and with analysts in a way where we can just spend our time where it's more of a value add. I think that, so, we can scale more, obviously. But I think that one thing I'm personally thinking about is that I'm not trying to get too caught up in perfecting any type of process with AI right now. At Miro, we have a corporate behavior called launch fast and iterate. And I think about that a lot when it comes to AI. I'm someone who naturally gets stuck in the trap of like being a perfectionist and wanting everything to be super buttoned up and look really great. And I've thought through every step of the process before I share it out with my stakeholders. But I think with the rate at which AI is changing, that is going to be kind of a waste of time for a lot of people. So I'm trying to make sure that I get 80% of the way there, and I'm not letting perfect be the enemy of good in this situation, because the AI tools and functions and capabilities are changing so fast that you may perfect a process and send it out to your stakeholders and be like, this is the new way of doing things. And in a month, there may be a new feature or a new tool that your company has purchased that completely wipes out that entire process. And then you're starting over. So I think having this mindset of moving quickly, trying new tools, trying new things, but not like nothing's written in stone right now. And things, again, if we're a year from now, I bet a lot of the things that we're building that have multi-step workflows probably will be maybe automated entirely. So it's moving quickly, and I don't want to get stuck in a trap where I am perfecting a process and that becomes a little irrelevant in a couple months.
Yeah, very relevant. I want to say hello to Alan Bergson. Very honored that you could join the show, Alan. In fact, I was hoping that we could have you on the show sometime and reach out to you. So I think he makes a great point about getting insights out to the team much faster. Thanks for joining, Alan. Now, one of the things that I keep asking, because I've had, I would call this an international show. I've had people from different parts of the world. Your company is also a global company. Now, the perception of both analyst relations and analysts varies geographically too. At some places, they are like really trusted advisors. In some places, they actually become like almost like a pseudo product management function because they know so much about the marketplace. What are some nuances that you see between the various countries where Miro is and you're dealing with geographical analysts?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to see the nuance, and you do start to pick up on things over time as you work with different stakeholders, whether internally or externally across different regions. Some of it is just like cultural nuance in terms of the ways of working can be different at times. I have experienced in the past having to adjust my own reaction to some of my colleagues like comments and they're being more direct, but they tend like that can happen, right? Where you're working with someone from a region and their way of working is to be really direct and straightforward. And that is like a nuance of how you partner and work together. But I also think that you brought up a good point around how analysts there's different perception of industry analysts in different regions. And I think that's probably most helpful to have a partnership with your different regional leads and get a read from them on how often are analysts coming up in conversations and in deals and the influence that they have across those different regions. I currently am leading a global program, but the emphasis probably shifts depending on where we're focused and the current analysts that we engage with. So, and I think there are also, of course, regional analysts, but global analysts. So depending on how your program is set up, that may differ significantly. But having the insight from your different sales leaders in particular across the globe is really helpful as you're thinking about who are we prioritizing and which of those business goals does each region care about, because that can differ significantly as well.
Very cool. So think back to your time and all the experience that you gained. What would you advise somebody who's like graduating and thinking about analyst relations? Should they think about analyst relations or not? What's your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing this for 10 years now, and I still really love the function. I think it is such a cool place to be because you have this unique vantage point. You have the seat at the table that you're both internally talking with your leadership team and understanding your business and what's a priority, but then you're also being able to provide that external signal. And I just think that's such an interesting place to be and to learn also if you're early on or mid-level in your career to get really great exposure. And if you're starting out, I would say that AR is unique in a lot of ways because there is a really great community that exists already. There are a lot of gatherings of AR leaders, and people are really willing to share their expertise and the way to approach things and problem solve together. And I think that is a particularly cool thing about the AR community. Whether you're talking to other AR peers or even industry analysts, I think there's a lot of sharing, and I love that about the community that exists today. So I would say look into that. If you do want to get involved in analyst relations, there are a lot of like gatherings of people. And I think that is a really cool, unique thing. It's actually kind of a small community too. So there's a lot of people who know each other and get connected. So a lot of networking that can happen there. But then I also think that when you're, if you're maybe further along in your career and you are looking to transition into analyst relations, just getting like a good read on the market is a great place to start. I think that understanding the competitive landscape and seeing what you can find, leveraging AI right now to understand like what is the current analyst perspective out there on our company, and getting a head start is a lot easier than maybe it would have been a couple of years ago. So I think coming in with a little bit of information about the market that your company is in and the vendor landscape gives you an automatic like leg up and a great way to position yourself if you're looking to formalize yourself in an AR role.
Yep. Alan has a comment. Nobody graduates thinking about analyst relations.
I can understand that one.
But I have a story for you. Like my son is in Stony Brook University. So he said he was going to do law and join Stony Brook. But midway, he changed and is going to major in mass communications. I don't know what bad lessons he learned from his dad, but I mean, that's one of the things. Like I had made a joke on LinkedIn some time ago. I'm sure nobody feels like that, but sometimes analyst relations feels like you're taking care of two mother-in-laws. That's true. But great points. This was very interesting, Ashley. One thing, like, what's your passion outside of work?
Well, that's a fun one. Right now, I am really into interior design and DIY projects at home. So, doing a lot of house projects and taking some things off of Pinterest and giving it a go at home. So that's where I'm spending most of my free time outside of work, is dabbling on my Pinterest board.
Wow, that's very cool. Sounds great. So, Ashley, we will bring up John now and then bring you back again for a joint panel after this. But thank you so much. A lot of great insights in this. Thanks. Hi, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that segment with Ashley Chabot of Miro. I really enjoyed it. And thank you very much, Alan, for your comments. And anybody else, please feel free to put your comments, and we can either put it to Ashley or our next guest who's going to come up. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jon Reed. Hey, John.
Hey, how we doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing well, doing well. I've been looking forward to this one.
No, I've been looking forward to this too. Like, I think from my early days as an analyst, I've met John, very welcoming. I think, just like Ashley said, the analyst relations community and the community of tech analysts, everybody gets along very well. They talk to each other. There's a lot of camaraderie. And I think it gets to a stage where you have established a relationship when people start exchanging, like, family photos, where their kids are and where travel is and things like that. So, John, I didn't do a good job because you are a person of so many talents. So why don't you go ahead and tell our audience a little bit about what you do and your experience and journey to where you are today?
Well, let's see. I've been in the enterprise for a long time, and I think it all comes down in the end to me to what does transformation look like and what does change look like in organizations, and how do we serve customers better and make projects more successful? And that's kind of ultimately where I arrived at as the co-founder of Diginomica for the last almost getting close to 15 years, not quite, we're not there yet, but we've been really trying to document what works and what doesn't, but also I think have provocative takes on what's working and what's not as well. And, I've been a big fan of kind of blurring the lines between media and analyst. And for a long time, I've been now also pushing analyst relations directors in the analyst industry and getting pushback and talking about what needs to change there, all in the context of this overall view of the fact that we just don't have enough project success in our industry, and we never have. And let's just be honest about that. There's a lot of reasons for it, and they're complicated. But the more we can be a part of customer success, I think the better off we all are. So that's kind of my frame. I'm a big AI geek. So I spend a whole lot of time on the technology side of AI. I spent the weekend studying decentralized causal AI graphs and how they can help ground content across locations that have different ground truths. So I'm kind of obsessed with data and truth, because I think without data and truth, you have no meaningful AI. But in the context of today's conversation, I'm just really interested in the change agents inside the analyst relations industry, and how do we cope with all the market change and pull together all the different stakeholders to make that happen. And that includes AR directors, people like you and me, bigger analyst firms, customers. I'm not a big fan of categorizing people and putting them into boxes. I think we should be working together on the same problems.
Oh, I like that very much. Of late, I've been touting, like, we might have just lightly touched a categoryless world, but that causes a nightmare for everybody else to say, like, oh my God, if categories go away, what happens? But I like what you use, the word solutions, right? That's what people are looking for.
Yeah.
I wanted to dig a little bit into how did you drop into becoming a technology analyst? What was the journey there?
Well, originally I thought of myself a little more as a journalist, in a sense that there's a certain integrity to who I admire in a great journalist that I always wanted to try to emulate, in terms of the quest for truth, trying to be transparent, But I was always interested in the subjective part of journalism too, of inserting yourself into the story and acknowledging your own biases and opinions. And when I got into the enterprise work, which is in the mid 90s, I increasingly wanted to aspire to someone who could provide context, because news happens all the time in our industry, as you know. And the news cycle is absolutely relentless right now. And I really, really feel bad for customers trying to make sense of that, and for buyers trying to understand how this impacts their plans and their footprint. And so I think what they need most is context. And so from an analyst perspective, my goal is to try to provide the best context that I can for what I think is happening, but also to really be provocative. I don't have all the answers, and I don't think anyone does. But what I do think I'm pretty good at doing is broaching issues that other people aren't talking about for whatever reason, and getting people to think. And they might not take my advice. That's not my concern. My job is to provoke and to say, here's what I think needs to change and why from my perspective and my research, and then let the chips fall where they may. But what I really crave is the dialogue, because we all have an angle that's valuable, and it's the clash of those angles right now that gets us to a better place. For example, I heard some things in your past segment that I really liked, and then a couple of things that I think I disagree with a little bit. And I think those things are all healthy, because that's how we get to a better place together.
Cool. I know. The diginomica is something that everybody should read. I think it's got a lot of viewpoints that you don't find elsewhere. So that's a good one too. Now, from an analyst viewpoint, what are some actions that a company can take to establish a truly productive relationship with technology analysts and with you?
Well, I think one thing you talked about in the previous segment that I liked was goals. And I think Alan's saying getting people to think is a tall order. Well, Alan, if people aren't gonna think anymore, then we all just might as well give up and go home. But the good news is that if you don't think through problems, you're not going to have successful projects. So within that scope, if you don't think, you won't be successful. And fortunately, there's some people that want to be successful and don't want to have bad projects and don't want to have to post on LinkedIn that they're now available because they lost their jobs and their companies and projects failed. So, but Alan, you make a good point. But the good news is there's enough people with an appetite for change to keep people like me employed. And as long as that's the case, then I'm good. And if people stop thinking, then I'll have to leave the industry. So fortunately, there's enough people still thinking that I don't have to do that. As far as goals are concerned, I think goals are really, really important. And I've been writing about what I call Next-Gen Analyst Relations for about 3 years now, like prior to AI disruptions. It's kind of a separate basket of disruptions that I've been cultivating around what I think is a need for more of a year-round dialogue and a year-round flow of information back and forth between analysts and their constituents and customers and vendors, rather than the more static cycles of old with annual reports that become out of date like almost the day they are written. So I've been advocating for a whole different way of thinking about analyst relations in general. But I think in general, you just have to set your goals, as you all were discussing before, and stick with them. And to me, the goal is really important, because I think the goal is really more about serving customers better and how are we going to do that. But it becomes very interesting, because if the goal, like for example, if the goal is changing how analysts are talking about your company, I'm not super crazy about that as a goal. The danger of that goal, for example, is that then executives start to think that the idea is to market to analysts and use them as a marketing extension and basically do a brain dump of facts and information into analysts' brains and hope that they echo that in the market. And I don't think that's an effective approach. I think a much more effective approach is to engage in the analyst community in a two-way dialogue, where you're sharing the latest information, but you're also taking strong feedback. And as a result, everyone's trying to improve. And you know what happens in the process of that, Shashi? You form better relationships. And relationships have a magical way of leading to better information. So that's kind of my virtuous cycle that I see. And we could talk about how AI fits into all of that if you want. But bottom line is that better relationships lead to better information, leads to better online discourse. and messaging kind of takes care of itself, in my opinion, in the process of doing that.
Yeah, great points. Doesn't surprise me with your viewpoints, but thank you, Brent, for this very important question. What is John's industry nickname?
Well, the PPN is kind of coined the Brohammer thing because it's sort of like affection but tough love. I don't know. I'm just trying to be better every day, so that's the nickname that I got.
Yeah, it's not cogito.
Yeah.
No, thanks. Thanks for participating. I think you actually answered a question that I was going to ask about, productive relationships between analysts and analyst relations. Maybe it's also time to talk about, some of the mistakes that companies make, when they engage with analysts. What have you seen and what do you recommend?
Well, I think I kind of alluded to the biggest mistake, which is to sort of see analysts as an extension of marketing and messaging and communications, and I think viewing analysts more strategically is really important. One of the more concerning trends in our industry that I've observed, and this kind of predates a little bit of the generative AI surge, but what I observed about 5 years ago was a lot of analyst relations directors that used to have a lot of clout with executives found themselves reporting into different people instead of the CEO, and they lost the ability to kind of create their own formats and rules of engagement that are more centered around dialogue and feedback. And suddenly you found yourself in these, let's be frank, marketing sessions for vendors, and it's not my job to reflect vendor marketing. I had an interesting conversation the other day with a vendor that wanted to brief me on a bunch of their integration tools. And what I said to them was, I said, just to be clear, I don't go out into the market and tell people how great your integration is, because the thing is, I got to validate that. I can't just take your word for it that your integration is good. And the reason that, why I don't do that, Shashi, is because in the old days, I used to write about, because vendors are always releasing the greatest integration tools, right? This has been going on for decades now. And what I would do is I would write about how great they were, and then I would go to shows and the customers would tell me, why did you say those tools were great? Those tools suck. They're or they're not ready. And so now what I do is I say, I want customer validation. And so my good fortune is that there's a lot of great AR directors out there that want to come up with a way to create better analyst relations. And I love talking with them, because they're all about, like, how do we get you all in front of customers so you can do that validation and hear from customers directly and get the context that what we're saying is actually happening in the real world. And I love that direction overall. And what we have to be careful about is the KPI culture, because when we get too obsessed with measuring analyst relations, we get into trouble, because a lot of the magic and the most important things that happen are hard to measure. And so one of my big themes in my work is, how do you measure the hard to measure things? And by the way, this is not just a problem with analyst relations. This is a problem with almost everything in the enterprise. Is a lot of the gold is the hard stuff. It's the hidden stuff. And how we measure that is becoming increasingly important, because if you can't measure it and surface it, it's not part of AI, and therefore it's not part of what we think of as the truth. But, just to give you like a very quick example, like I've seen so many situations at analyst events where an analyst like yourself will pull a vendor aside and say, hey, I wanted to alert you to a couple of customers that are having a problem with this because your cloud infrastructure has an issue with this kind of deployment or whatever. These are like invaluable moments, right, that can change. And I've seen them change, like how a company goes to market, or a new opportunity, or a new pricing plan, or whatever. It's hard to overstate the impact of that, but it happened in like a side conversation, or a hallway moment, or a candid Q&A, and it didn't show up on anyone's KPI. And so part of our job now is to accept that KPI culture is never going to go away. And so we have to learn how to play the KPI game and measure the stuff that really matters, as well as the stuff that I think is more vanity metrics, which is what we usually live on in our industry, unfortunately.
You brought up a lot of good points, as expected. One of the things, when the last one that you mentioned about, is it important to have a point of contact, or is it important for analyst relations to handle that kind of feedback where something is broken you hear about it and you want to pass that along. And sometimes it may be a little bit more, I would say, urgent because,
Yep.
yeah, I mean, sometimes I've heard debates where, hey, analyst relations is not customer support, but I don't know. How would you handle that? I've faced some of these situations that you just mentioned too.
Yeah, it's tricky, right? I mean, ideally, there's a point person on the analyst relations side that facilitates that conversation internally. But there are different vendors and different customers that feel differently about all of this. And I'm a big fan of what I call outside in leadership, which is welcoming the disruption from the outside, especially when it's informed disruption from people that care. Like when I see someone like yourself raise your hand and like push a vendor during a discussion, you're not doing it to make a vendor look bad or to make yourself look good. You're doing it because you want them to be successful and you're trying to push, and you realize that a lot of times the best way to help someone be successful in this industry is by pushing the issues a little bit when you have the chance, not by just saying, oh, what a great lunch, what a great discussion, thank you for including me. Where does that leave us? I mean, obviously it was great. I'm sure the food was great, but the point is we're here for a reason. Let's have the courage to push each other and try to be better. And like you said, in companies that would embrace that, they would make sure to get you to the right person inside the organization or pass the feedback along. And oftentimes that's what happens. But I do run into times where that process can break down, where the feedback isn't welcomed as much, and it can be a little baffling. But honestly, like the thing about change is you have to start with a snapshot of where you are. And some of the best analyst relations meetings I've ever been at, the CEO interrupted a difficult conversation and said, you know what, you're right, we're not there yet, but we heard your feedback, we noted it, and we're going to act on it. And we're going to come back next year and you're going to see the progress that we've made. And that is so compelling because no analyst in the room, no matter how critical they're feeling in that moment, can you have to respect that. You have to respect the commitment that you heard. Now, of course, the added piece that I would add from my next-gen analyst relations sort of mentality is not to come back in a year, but to find ways of staying in touch and kind of benchmarking that throughout the year so that we can all stay in touch, because the market's moving too fast right now to just wait a year for an update on something static. And so, hopefully we can use tools like AI to make that conversation more dynamic, kind of like you discussed with your previous guest, where it can be really good at surfacing information quickly and keeping that thing going, and of course, then it gets really entertaining because you say, well, how far can AI go? How much can it replace research, and how much can it replace people like you and me? And that's a whole different fascinating conversation. But
actually, that was going to be my question too. Like, two things. Number one is we have to be very supportive of everybody, whether you're an independent analyst or an analyst is part of a big thing. But put forward some emerging trends, like how is AI changing the model, and is there any plus side to how analysts and analyst relations are going to interact? I think, in my opinion, and feel free to disagree, the point of view from an analyst, I feel, can be replaced by AI for one reason. Number one is we change our minds so fast, and AI is very like process oriented, and tells you what it has learned or analyzes and predicts. What do you think of that?
yeah, look, to do justice to AI's impact on analyst relations, we would need to spend the whole hour on that topic. So I won't try to do full justice to it. But the answer is that it's complicated. To a large extent, I welcome the disruption, and I always have, from the AI side, because what you just alluded to is differentiated insights. AI has a wonderful way of challenging underperforming human capabilities. So if you're putting out generic research, then you're in a lot of trouble with AI, because AI can do pretty generic research. AI can't do what I do. Now, whether what I do has market value is a very interesting question. And we will have to let the market decide whether they value what I do. But I know for certain that AI can't do what I do. I mean, I just, right before this call, I was on a long conversation with an analyst relations director about a upcoming event. And we were drilling into all these nuances of how to handle that event, how to get the right customers in front, how to assess their industry strategy and roadmap. And this is someone who is token maxing on Claude. So they're token maxing the crap out of their lives and getting a good result, by the way. They're managing a lot of the event, I think, on Claude, as far as I know, but they're still talking to me, right? So in that sense, yes. But I do think we do need to engage with these tools and figure out, how they work best and how they can enhance what we're doing. And, but I worry a little bit sometimes about people getting infatuated with like the LLM as an expert. I think is a flawed model. The LLM just is not a true domain expert. So I really want to encourage younger people who think about industry analysts, that career is not dead because you can do good AI research. But it challenges you, though, because you cannot put out mediocre stuff and expect to get by.
That's true. No,
And look, like Sandy there, she's validating me. Yeah, I'm not AI can do what I do, but like I said, that doesn't mean that I'm market relevant. That's a separate question. So
no, thank you, Sandy, for joining and for weighing in. You're absolutely right. Nobody can replace John.
hi, Sandy.
I'm going to bring up Ashley for a joint panel and some final thoughts and introduce you both to each other. Welcome back, Ashley, and meet Jon Reed. I don't know if you both have met before, but this show has been really interesting and a lot of viewpoints here.
Can I just say one thing? I love Miro. I'm a customer. And I actually used Miro to chart out a bunch of these dynamics around buyers and analyst relations and stuff. And it was fantastic. And I love that tool. So I'm a happy customer. So how's that for Miro messaging for you?
Yeah, that's great. I'll bring it back to the team.
Yeah, I really liked your comment, by the way, in the back channel, when I was getting at this whole thing around messaging, because I'm not saying that it's bad to have analysts echoing proper messaging. In fact, I think one of the best feelings as an analyst relations director is probably logging onto LinkedIn when you've been busy with other stuff all day and seeing an analyst you've engaging with other people on LinkedIn, kind of accurately representing, maybe not agreeing with everything you would have them say, but at least being very well informed and engaging with people with good information. I think that's a good thing. I just come from the perspective that I think that kind of thing is more of a happy byproduct of the kind of dialogue that I endorse. And the only reason I flag that is because I get worried about executives when they start thinking that way, because the end result is often to push information and turn it into an information dump. And the reality is there's only so much information you can dump into people's heads in a given hour or day. And so that's why I really talk about people when they plan events and stuff. What is the goal? And I think the goal should be to deepen the relationships, because when you deepen the relationships, all kinds of good things can happen. And you can have follow-up deep dives on Zoom or Teams or whatever. And you can have really cool online discussions with the executive team. But it all stems to those relationships. So that's kind of why I came at that way.
Yeah. And the other thing too, that I was nodding my head along to a lot of the things you were saying. I don't think you could see me. But when you were talking about providing the context and the two-way dialogue that happens throughout the course of the year, I think most AR people would agree that would be the goal that they're trying to get to. And I think sometimes the challenge that AR leaders might deal with internally is a mix of opinions, whether they're stakeholders or leadership. It might vary across that team. But then there's also the added challenge when you have new leadership come in, and everyone might be at a different point along the journey for what their perception is of industry analysts and why they might want to engage. So I think it's a good reminder to AR leaders that is the ideal end goal. It just sometimes takes a little bit of time and a little bit of a journey, I think, for us to get our stakeholders to that two-way dialogue. But you touched on a lot of things that I think are so critical, especially the last comment you made around the relationship building. The best insights and the best conversations come out of the discussions with analysts that you have good relationships with. And I think the irony in some ways is if you have a senior leader or an executive who really cares about influencing an analyst, to me, I think that I would in those situations say that we really don't need to influence, but we want to partner. We want to partner with an analyst. We want to have that two-way conversation. And that usually leads to better results in the long run anyways. So I think there's a lot that we as AR leaders can start to do to plant the seeds with our internal teams. And like I mentioned, there's always added complexity. Sometimes you have a new leader come in who may never have worked with an industry analyst before. They might only think of analysts as a dot on an evaluation. So sometimes there's a lot of that internal education we have to bring our leaders along for on the journey. But I completely agree that two-way dialogue and those deep relationships is the end goal that I think most AR leaders are trying to get to.
That's true.
Yeah.
And I want to thank Sandy for her point. Sandy has been a guest on this show with Paul Greenberg, someone I respect a lot, very helpful and participates in the community a lot. I think what she says is, real-time inquiries and advisories are so important to differentiate people who have a firm grasp and where the industry is headed. So I think any comments on that, Ashley and John? Thanks, Andy.
Well, I mean, I think I always try to listen to where Sandy's coming from because Sandy's really spent a lot of time thinking about this. And I think analyst relations directors can find that, at the promo, when analysts are doing promo on our behalf, it feels good at first, but then when you really get someone who challenges your executive team and challenges their market assumptions, you realize, oh my gosh, this is a whole different dynamic and it's so much more arguably powerful. But to Ashley's point, it's not easy. And like I did a bunch of AI generated content around my articles on Next-Gen Analyst Relations, and I did a video show where we evaluated some of that content. And one of the problems was that I thought it was too hard on AR directors, but that's what AI can do sometimes, is take a narrative and kind of hammer it home. And some of my stuff is kind of satirical. Like I have an article on how to screw up an analyst day. And so like it kind of, like, I thought it was unfair to AR directors who are kind of put in a tough spot. And to your point, Ashley, they're usually not the reason why things are going wrong. It's and part of this is because how I referred to, where there's not always that deep CEO relationship of the old school CEO that says AR is everything to me. The AR director gets to do whatever they want. You listen to that person. That's not the industry that we live in now. And so AR directors have to manage executives' expectations, many of whom are new to this kind of discourse. And it's not an easy position that you're in. I think it's a very, very hard job. I think the cool thing is when those magic moments happen and that dialogue opens up and an executive that's not used to taking feedback gets really informed feedback from someone that really knows their industry inside and out. And you start to realize, oh my God, this is this magic, and the light bulbs just went off, and you're the kind of person that makes that happen. And that's totally cool. But a lot of times people don't realize how hard it is to manage that and get people to buy in. I was just talking with another AR director who was trying to take one of my ideas, which is to have a panel of customers moderated by a customer with no vendor over moderation, no vendor person on stage at all. And how does that go over with your executive team? And the thing is that it's hard because we're used to trying to control the message. And so the point is, it's a journey. It's not something you can get to overnight.
Yep. Thanks, Heather, for joining. And the next few minutes will also be interesting when you watch the recording. So Alan says, like, senior executives don't lead G2 reviews, so they talk to analysts. I think it's perfectly on point. One question for both of you is, should analysts give feedback directly during the briefing or save it for a note after the briefing? John, you go first, and then we'll have Ashley.
Well, I think it's all about trust and understanding the company and what works for that company and the sensitivity of that information. Like in general, if it's an issue that matters to all customers, then I think a lot of times it's better to really discuss it openly, at least in the confines of these discussions are somewhat NDA a lot of times anyway. But if it's a very, very sensitive issue involving some issue with leadership or customers, you have to pull them aside. And part of, Shashi, how you and I and people of our ilk gain trust is our judgment around that. And so, but I would say when in doubt, you should ask someone like Ashley, what's the best way to broach this information and come up with a plan,
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of different flavors of feedback. So I would say 90% of the time, I think I would prefer an analyst to share real time with the subject matter expert that is presenting. And then back to John's point around this two-way dialogue, I think that's where you can start to see that happen a little bit more. And it's less talking to the analyst, more of, okay, let's have a conversation and sharing perspective in a respectful way. I think that maybe there's a small percentage of times where you may want to approach something with a little bit more delicacy to it. And that's when it would be great to work with your AR person and make sure that you're finding the right way to bring that feedback internally. Sometimes, like, we as AR leaders will get feedback from analysts directly, and then we have the opportunity to position that how we need to internally to the right people. Sometimes it has to go through multiple teams. Sometimes we have to maybe align it to a particular initiative internally to get the most momentum behind it. So making sure to keep AR in the loop, though, is probably important. I know that in my experience, sometimes AR is looked at as a gatekeeper and the blocker. But I think that when your analysts are partnering with the AR lead to get information into the business, that's the best way to make sure that it lands with the right people and in the right way too.
Yep.
Preach, Sandy, preach. There you go. 100%.
That's true. Thank you, Sandy. Yeah, totally agree. A question for both of you. I know it's time is very valuable for both analysts and AR folks, but I think there should be more agenda-less meetings. What do you think?
Well, I probably have a lot of opinions about this because I work for a company where we talk a lot about asynchronous communication, and that's a lot that can happen with our platform. But yeah, agendaless meetings with analysts and finding different ways to engage analysts. Maybe I'll quickly detour and then hand it over to John. But I'm often thinking about, like, how can we connect with industry analysts in ways outside of the traditional agenda full meeting. And I think at Miro, for example, I like to experiment with, like, how can we have a board that's an access point for analysts to come in and collaborate with us asynchronously. And I'm hoping that there's more adoption of that with analysts moving forward, so that it's not just these moments in time, and sometimes having to get a briefing scheduled takes weeks depending on the analyst and the firm. So I think looking for ways to collaborate with industry analysts and the vendors, that dynamic a little bit more frequently, is something that there could be a whole separate conversation about. But John, what are your thoughts on that?
So I'll make it fast. I know we're low on time, but in general, like in an in-person setting, for example, like some of the most powerful sessions are an Ask Me Anything session with the leadership team, or alternately a customer panel that is not the dreaded over-moderated panel where we have the vendor has scripted a bunch of questions, but just open the discussion up with the customers and the analysts. And both of those things are such a strong show of confidence by the vendor that they're on a good path and they're ready to take all questions. And you just can't underestimate how convincing that is, versus when someone over moderates something, they're telling me they're insecure about something. That's the message they're sending. And that's not the message they want to send. In the online stuff, what's fascinating is people are still very attached to their slide decks, and they really want to cover their 25 slides. It's really important for some reason that they do this. And I think that is just a legacy way of thinking about engagement. And I'm not saying you can't build a 25 slide deck, but here's the cool thing. When you just start a meeting and say, hey, we just want to have some back and forth about our latest stuff, either you do it for two-minute overview and then have discussions. But you know what's cool is a lot of times it comes back to the slides as a reference document. So it's not like the slides are irrelevant. A question will be asked and it's like, oh, let me show you a couple slides that answer that question. So you can still make your slides and still have fun with your slides, but please don't get on a meeting and say we got to cover these 25 slides. It's just a disaster.
Great points, both of you. I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm sure people who are watching live and people who will watch the recording will also enjoy it. I mean, I want to thank everybody who was on these shows, and especially today's show, Ashley and Jon. A lot of good points, a lot of good dialogue. Thank you so much for your time. And thanks everyone for watching. And thank you, Alan, Brent, and Sandy for your comments too. Have a great day, everyone. And wherever you're in the world, I look forward to your feedback on this show. And please make any suggestions for guests who should be on the show. Thank you.
Thanks.
This has been a Players Productions Network digital broadcast.